G'day, mate. Luke Ford here, and I finished last night watching season 4 of Narcos. So it's the Narcos Mexico, and really enjoyed the show just as I enjoyed the 3 previous seasons. But I wanted to talk in particular about one of the 2 major characters in Narcos. And I'm just talking here not about the historical character, not about the DEA undercover agent Kiki Camarena as he was in real life. I just want to talk about him as he was shown in this show. And I think he illustrates that old 12-step saying or prayer that usually begins and ends every 12-step meeting. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. It seemed like this guy, as portrayed in this series, did not understand that. First of all, just some more background. I've really come to enjoy watching Narcos TV series. I watched a Colombian TV series on Pablo Escobar. It was about 72 episodes, and it was great. It's on Netflix, absolutely worth viewing. And it completely changed my thinking on narco trafficking. Prior to watching it, my perspective was these narcos are scum, and the people who work for them are scum. And that's it. Then I watched the series and I realized, why should narco traffickers give a damn if gringos want to buy their product? Nobody is forced to purchase cocaine. Nobody is forced to purchase heroin or marijuana, generally speaking. So if they are able to sell this product to an outgroup, then what we're really asking of them is to make an extraordinary sacrifice to not do it. And human beings, generally speaking, don't make extraordinary sacrifices for outgroups. So the easiest and most efficient way to make a ton of money in Latin America, apparently, is to get into the narco trade. And so why would we expect them to desist from doing that if there's a lot of money to be made for them? I mean, enormous amounts of money. We're asking them to be moral because we in the West don't have the self-discipline to voluntarily restrict ourselves from consuming their products. So I still hate drug use and drug users and drug dealers, but I feel like now I better understand them. And I realize that it's kind of naive for us to expect that people who can make a ton of money providing this product will desist from doing so because millions and millions of people in the West don't have the self-discipline to abstain from purchasing this product. Okay, we really generally can't expect other people to put themselves at a disadvantage to protect us from our own weakness. And so I used to just have contempt for Latin Americans in the drug trade. And now I realize that's silly, because that's just not the way human beings operate. They don't voluntarily restrict themselves and hurt themselves to protect outgroups from voluntarily procuring their product. And so let's say you get into drug enforcement. It's obviously just been a giant failure. Like in intermittent successes that get on TV news, but overall it's been a giant failure. And so these drug enforcement agents like Kiki Camarena was portrayed in this series, who went above and beyond, These were driven men with a mission, and they make for a great TV show. But if this was anything like the real life dude, he was risking his life in a fruitless cause. Like if you're in drug enforcement, there's no real reason to risk your life because you're not doing any good anyway. You're not making a difference. So you might be able to reduce, or no, you might be able to, I guess, increase the street price of cocaine by what, 10%, 20%, 50%. That's it. You're not making any. You're not making any real difference. Now, we all want to believe we're making a difference. We all want meaning. I want to believe that these videos I make a difference. But it's important that I have an accurate understanding of what I'm doing. So, for example, when JF typically does a stream, he gets about 1,000 live viewers. Okay, when I do my regular show with Kevin Michael Grace, I typically get, say, 120 viewers, sometimes 200, sometimes 80, but 120 is probably a pretty average amount. So there I am. I've got a modest audience, and I shouldn't have illusions that I'm Jordan Peterson or even JF or Ben Shapiro. I'm little guy with a modest audience. I'm not changing the world here, but I think I do have I provide some value to hundreds of people on a weekly basis, and I think that's like an accurate perception of my own place, my own lane, staying in my own lane. Now, let's say if I risked my life, I could, let's say, multiply my audience by 100 times, but it wouldn't really have any increased effect on the real world. Let's say it was just like, make it more like, car crashes, something like that, just vastly more, more entertaining, more emotionally compelling, but doesn't actually make any difference in the real world. So I could feel that because I'd increased my audience by 100 times, I could feel that I was 100 times more significant. But that would be in the scenario I outlined a complete delusion. So too, this Kiki Camarena, who went undercover with the Mexican narcos, may well have operated under the illusion that he was making a gigantic difference, and that by risking his life, he was saving the Western world from the scourge of killer drugs. But it's a delusion. Like at best, he would have. The maximum that he could have achieved is increase the street price for marijuana or cocaine by 5%. And yet he had this, according to the show, he had this like messianic delusion that he was trying to save Western civilization by risking his life with these traffickers. And the other thing that struck me was how foolhardy he was, just as described in the show, that he really wanted to go up to this leading narco trafficker and tell him he's an asshole and just like emotionally confront him. I'm 52 years of age. I don't think I've ever gone up to anyone in my life and told him he was an asshole or a mofo or any of those other slurs. I don't think I've ever done that, let alone in the pornography industry, where you have a lot of criminally inclined, violently inclined people. When I was writing about them for 10 years, I never went up to them and like confronted them and said, "You're an asshole." And never once did I confront anyone in the pornography industry and denigrate them, try to humiliate them, provoke a confrontation. Never. So if you're a typical DEA agent, you are under no threat from the narcos. They're not going to kill you. But as portrayed in this series, Narcos Mexico, this guy went against his orders and instructions repeatedly, like repeatedly risked his life. He went undercover against all orders. He went to confront people against all orders. He got out of his lane. He got out of his lane. And so what happened to this guy as he got out of his lane? Well, eventually, if you humiliate people enough, you confront, if you get out of your lane, not very nice things are going to happen. So he was abducted February 8, 1985 by corrupt police officers working for drug lord Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo. And Kiki was tortured at Gallardo's ranch for 30 hours, then murdered. His skull, jaw, nose, cheekbones, and windpipe were crushed. His ribs were broken and a hole was drilled into his head with a power drill. He'd been injected with amphetamines and other drugs, most likely to ensure that he remained conscious while being tortured. And I got to say, as I was watching this show, I didn't have any sympathy for him. Like, if you go up to a tiger, like, and punch the tiger in the nose, and then eventually the tiger reacts and tortures you and kills you, I don't have a lot of sympathy for you. And as portrayed by this show, this is exactly what this guy did. Kiki Camarena Salazar, he was just repeatedly going up to the tiger that is Narcos Mexico and just like, boom, 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 just punching it in the nose and repeatedly violating orders, getting out of his lane, had incredible delusions of grandeur. If you work in the DEA, you're not going to make any substantial difference. You might have what feels like a win here, but it's just like building a sandcastle against the tide. Okay, at most, you're just going to increase the price of cocaine a little bit. And this guy got so far out of his lane, he got tortured. And I was watching him get tortured, and I saw the pain on his wife's face and the horror among his co-workers, and maybe there's just something broken in me, but I just didn't have any sympathy because I thought this guy was just so reckless. He was just so far out of his lane that this is what happens. And I think there's a lesson there. We should stay in our lane. We should not be delusional. If we work for the DEA, or if we're a rabbi or a priest, or we're a doctor or a nurse or a secretary, we should try to have an accurate conception of our place in the world, stay in our lane, and don't do illegal, risky, dangerous things against the direct orders of our supervisors, by and large. You're just going to end up in a very sad place. Okay. Now, I've been watching more of these Kenneth Brown videos. They're really good. So I want to play a few more excerpts and comment on them. So this is going to be about going beyond the black pill. So I'm just going to kind of run through what this audience is. This audience is a 100% mostly white, 100% male at least audience. And it's sort of self-selecting for people who are antisocial. I mean, when you have free time, are you going to spend that time hanging out with the friends, or are you going to spend your time watching YouTube videos? So already we're talking about mostly white, 100% male, young men, not a lot of friends. They're drawn to this alt-right, and they have a worldview, and I'm going to describe that. And it goes... That's a pretty good summary of the people who watch alt-right videos, including this one. Now, I'm not saying it's 100%, but it's probably at least 70%, 80% accurate. I know from my video statistics that my audience is 95% male. My audience isn't broken down on racial demographics by YouTube, but this kid is pretty sharp. Kenneth Brown. This is his video excerpts from Beyond Blackpilling, which he released a few days ago. Through these, meme titles of the blue pill, and this is your soy boy optimism. Everything is fine. Every year we'll get richer. Everything will be more peaceful. This is Francis Fukuyama. This is, the
90s with Bill Clinton. This is, you know, the fall of the Soviet Union, the American superpower, Americanism. Technology is going to enable us to live forever, and we will explore the universe. This is sort of this centrist moderate position. So
that's a pretty good summary of like the blue pill outlook.
Someone can believe in this, and they can sort of be on the left, or they can sort of be on the right. It would be someone, you know, maybe who lives in Washington, D.C., or someone who lives in an urban area, or it could be someone who lives in a suburban or even a rural area. But this is someone who just sort of has a sanguine outlook, a positive outlook. Then you get to the red pill. And the red pill here, it's important to look at the colors. There's kind of a method behind the memes here. The blue is a placid, it's a tranquil color. It's calm. Red is an angry color. So the red...
I guess I don't think visually. I never thought of this. Such an obvious point. Blue is a tranquil color and red is an angry color. Obvious point. Never occurred to me.
Pill, immediately there's a choleric pessimism, a fighting fanaticism. When people get the red pill, here's the statement I want to make. The world is crumbling. Civilization is on the edge of a cliff. We're heading toward collapse. If we don't use a kind of fanatical energy, almost a religious zeal, if we don't use that to seize power back from the elites, humanity will descend into an animal state and will never explore the stars. Now,
that's a really interesting summary. See, I've always thought of the red pill as simply seeing reality clearly. And he's talking, that's not his description of the red pill. In fact, his description of the red pill has very little to do with seeing the reality clearly. So what he's discussing is what happens when someone who's already marginalized, already struggling in life, discovers the red pill and then makes it the primary basis of his being. So he's describing the emotional reactions of disenfranchised white males, in particular, to TRS or the Daily Stormer, or even just basic crime statistics broken down by race.
Now, when I say that, my audience is going to say, oh, when you say civilization, you mean white civilization. When you say fanaticism, you mean like extreme right politics, populist nationalism. And when you say animal state, you're talking about, you know, racial mixing and miscegenation.
And this is a terrific example of how agile this guy's thinking is. He's able to take what traditionally these alt-right takes, but show how this kind of emotional reaction that characterizes part of the alt-right also covers part of the alt-left.
If I reread that statement to someone who is anti-Trump, never Trump, hashtag resist, hashtag persist, they'll say the world is crumbling because of Donald Trump. Civilization is collapsing because of racism. If we don't use fanaticism, the blue wave, to seize power away from the elites, the Koch brothers, humanity will descend into an animal state of bigotry and will never explore the stars, just like Neil deGrasse Tyson told us that we would. So there is a kind of social justice warrior.
That's great. Like, that's like the social justice warrior equivalent of like the emotional, unformed part of the red pill contingent.
Attitude, social justice meaning the social justice of the left, but also the social justice of the right. Joseph Goebbels used the term social justice, as well as you had the American priest, Father Coughlin, who used the term social justice in an anti-Semitic context. So that spiel, the red pill, really is not just on the right, but there is a red pill on the left. You have the blue pill, where people are just sort of placidly sanguine, optimistic, kind of like corporate culture politics. Like, oh, I'm not, you know, I kind of believe in like Republic.
Yeah, so some good stuff here of perspectives that I'd never thought of. I don't think he's accurate about what is the red pill, but this is still an interesting new perspective. It seems like this guy would be in the top 99th percentile for verbal IQ, very sharp. Wonder if he's a philosophy major.
Republican, we got to cut taxes, but then I'm also like kind of liberal on social issues, and I like what Trump's doing with the economy, but then I don't mind if you're transgender, that's fine as long as you can contribute to the economy. So there's the blue pill, and it's the psychological state. Really what we're talking about here is a psychological state that then seeks a narrative to adopt to already felt feelings. So if you're just...
Wow, that's a great take. He's talking about the blue pill and the red pill, the psychological states where you're seeking a narrative that matches what you're already feeling. And that's a brand new take, because traditionally the denotative meaning of a blue pill coming from the Matrix is someone who embraces a false understanding of reality because it makes him happy, and someone who takes the red pill, someone who wants truth even if it makes him unhappy. So now he's going beyond the denotative meaning of blue pill and red pill to a connotative meaning. He's kind of pushing way beyond the literal truth of the terms and just bringing a new perspective.
Angry at the world because you had a terrible childhood, you're more likely to be a social justice warrior, either meaning a alt-right person or someone who's a Bernie bro or part of the Democratic Socialist Movement for America or something. You're going to get in this anger stage where you're angry about the world in general, and so you search for political narratives that already jive with your feelings. So you feel a certain way, and you're like, hey, this political narrative affirms everything that I already feel. So
I think this is exactly what goes on for most people. They choose a political narrative that suits their feelings. And then when they find it, then they look for facts and for logic that supports the political narrative that matches up with their emotional state.
I'm going to latch onto that. Now I'm going to talk about what I would call the purple pill. So it's kind of a mixture of the blue pill, which is just this placid go along to get along, managerial attitude, a corporate culture attitude.
I've never heard of the purple pill before, so I think credit to Kenneth Brown for coming up with a new pill. Maybe he can sell these and make some shekels.
And then you have the red pill, which is this rebellious, revolutionary attitude. And the mixture of the two is sort of a measured realism. And I use the term purple pill as a mixture of the two colors, but also signifying royalty. So this is an elitist minoritarian perspective. So let's try to make a statement like this. Even if populist nationalism fails, we'll have Brazil, the Philippines, India, China, Russia. These are technically third world countries, but Duterte is making gains against drug trafficking.
Okay, so he's extending the meaning here of the purple pill. I never heard of purple pills before. As he's explaining it, it's like, this could be a useful concept. I also dig how purple, yeah, that does represent the color of royalty.
Trafficking. Bolsonaro in Brazil is making certain gains against crime. In China, you've got the nationalist communism that has been growing the economy. Putin in Russia, he still has very high popularity despite certain sanctions and problems in the economy. Still, there is sort of this hope for the future. So it's less than optimal. It's not a utopia, but it's not disaster. And we can survive within these systems. And maybe genetic engineering is going to come along, and it's going to surpass all the nationalist, ethno-nationalist sisters.
Interesting stuff. I want to
you're not helping people
fast forward to
put yourself having a kind or something. Well, extremism, right? People are willing to engage with like these extreme trollish memes and this rightist sadism.
Yeah, here he's going off on the alt-right, and it's pretty funny and pretty accurate. So let me just back it up a little more with my great boomer tech here.
I get better in my thinking. People critique me. That always helps me refine my thinking in a reactionary sort of way. But at the end of the day, you're not building anything if you don't have anything to offer. I mean, where people who critique, you just endlessly critique. You watch every single one of my videos and you endlessly critique. Out of what spirit? It is the spirit of covering up your own lack of production, your own lack of creativity, your own lack of building. You're just tearing down other people. And you always cover that up while saying, well, you know, you think you're building something, but it's all worthless. Everything you say is immature and everything you say is stupid. And, you know.
Well, if critiques are thoughtful, if critiques add value, then you are building something, even if you solely engage in critique.
Why should I ever offer up my own thought? Why should I ever put effort into educating other people who are so stupid? And it's a misanthropy. So where are your videos? Where are your contributions? Where is your desire to build people up rather than strike people down? Where is it? Where is your risk? I mean, people are willing to engage with this political extremism, right? People are willing to engage with like these extreme.
One of the greatest blessings in my life was when I joined 12-step programs and adopted the approach that nobody is better or worse than anyone else. So this is just an emotional approach, a spiritual approach for my well-being. Doesn't mean that I don't recognize that some people are faster than others, that some people are smarter than others, that some people are more likely to be good citizens than other people. But just in your day in, day out life, when you're looking at your peers excelling you, getting married, having kids, achieving status in the community and at work, at times I'd feel pretty lousy about myself and try to think about ways that I was superior to them. So spiritually, 12-step programs help me to drop out of that type of thinking. It's a thinking that generally leads to unhappiness and dysfunction, continually comparing yourself to others and trying to think about, okay, well, if I look at things from this angle, I am superior to them after all.
Trollish memes and this rightist sadism, they're willing to engage with that in a fantasy land, the individualism where they can't get hurt, there's no threat, there's no risk. I mean,
I remember I had a therapist who said, I'd hate to see you end up as the guy at the bar talking about how he could have been a contender. And I had another therapist who said, I'd hate to see you waste your whole life in delusion. So I was diagnosed in 2000 with narcissistic personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder. So these tendencies I have to waste my life in delusion, in fantasies of how awesome I am, to get completely out of touch with reality, and to, as a narcissist, you just go around trying to provoke people into giving you feedback, to tell you who you are, because at core you don't know who you are, and so you kind of develop a sense of self based on the feedback you get. So you're always pushing people's boundaries, and then eventually people snap and put limits on you, and then you take that really badly. So connection after connection, relationship after relationship, community after community, you just burn through it.
It takes a risk to trust people, to try to build something with other people, because whenever you tie your fortunes to those of others, there's always the risk that it could come crashing down and it's out of your hands. You know, at least if you fail on your own, you only have yourself to blame. And that's a more controlled, familiar situation. Well, I failed.
Yeah, one of the traits of the underachiever is that they don't want to work with others, that they just want to do everything on their own, when sometimes you're better suited doing things with other people. But the pain of losing when you commit to a team can be just unbearable for some people. They can handle losing on their own because they feel that they had responsibility. But when they join a team and then they lose because of the bad choices of other people in the team, they just can't handle that. So this unwillingness to take chances at human cooperation and connection is a predominant characteristic of losers.
But at least I know it's my fault, and there's, you know, it's all on me. Whereas if you're part of a group and the group fails, then that's something really scary, because now you've kind of staked your identity in something which is outside of your personal control. And for control freaks, that's a very scary thing to do. But if you want to be constructive, you have to do that. So you have to be collectivist. So again, Jordan Peterson's wrong. You can't just be an individualist. Everything out there is deeply flawed. We have to go beyond. Like, what we have now is not a good thing. All that alt-right growth, where they just said, oh, we're just going to keep growing.
And here he comes in with his alt-right critique. It's pretty funny and pretty accurate.
You know, we doubled our membership this year. We're going to continue to double it into infinity. We're just going to win, win, win. That turned out to be a total lie. It was a flash in the pan, like many other flashes in the pan. Like many stars rise and fall. Like, you have a child actor. I mean, the alt-right is basically a child actor, right?
Another great analogy coming up. The alt-right as a child actor. It's funny and pretty prescient.
Promoted by the media. Loved the media coverage. Trolling was designed to get a reaction from the media. They loved it when, oh, we trolled the media, and they did this article about how we're so threatening. So there was a mutual sycophantic relationship between the alt-right and the media. And they said, we're just going to keep growing forever. But they were a child actor. I mean, the child actor who has the TV series or the movie series, and then they grow up and then they're done. And then they're a drug addict. And that's kind of the position of the alt-right today. You look at the core members.
And a great comment in the chat from Vegetable. I watched a documentary about Rhodesia yesterday. Would have been a cautionary tale from which we could learn if the media didn't downplay it. So good point. And just curious if anyone watched the reunion of JF Garepi and Andy Worski yesterday. It seemed like a lot of drama in the chat. Andy apparently challenging JF to a fight. People in the stream saying that Andy was high or drunk. And JF just had this look on his face through 90% of the show that looked like I'm dealing with a moron here. However, I thought they were a great team back in the day. And I thought that they were better together than separate. So
the alt-right who are still around, you look at the people who are faithful to them, who sacrificed everything for them. Some people have even died. I mean, and you look at where they are now, and you look at who's left, and you look at, I mean, what has been preserved there? What has been preserved there? I mean, what bonds of friendship and loyalty and faithfulness, what's been preserved there? You have to ask. And where it has been preserved, it become, well, hey.
Well, what has been preserved from the alt-right's success, from its high watermarks? I think you could predict this if you looked at what has been preserved from the principal players previously. So we often think that there's something unique about America's racial situation and racial tensions. No, just reflects similar situations elsewhere in the world when you have similar races living in proximity. There's nothing unique about America's racial situation. So Richard Spencer rose to great prominence in the news media in 2015 and 2016, and then had a dramatic crash. And then if you look back on his previous 10 years, you'd see these same sort of oscillations where he would start something that looked very promising, but did not follow through on it for long. So usually the best predictor of the future is what happened in the past. And if you're a football team and you want to know where you're at, then just look at your one-loss record. So Mike Enoch developed The Right Stuff, and he went through a great deal of adversity, and he kept his operation afloat. And if you looked at him prior to 2014, you'd see that this was a guy who was willing to go through great adversity and stick to something. So other people who got excited about the alt-right and joined in had histories of chronic social failure, chronic economic failure, chronic failure with human relationships, and just navigating social situations. And so, of course, people who are socially damaged are not going to be able to sustain a movement. On the other hand, the alt-right has attracted a lot of very smart people, and they were thriving before they got into the movement. They're still thriving now.
Hey, look, here's an example of where it's been preserved. Then I will give you a round of applause, and I will say, hey, great job on being the exception to this massive catastrophe. This massive child acting career is basically what's going on. And there has to be something beyond that, because, you know, we're not just going to live for the duration of an alt-right political movement. We saw it, you know, grow, and we saw it crash, and we saw it die, essentially. And some people are still clinging on to the dead thing in the same way people still call themselves.
So this guy looks like he's about 25 years of age, but when you listen to him, it sounds like a guy who reads 50 to 100 books a year, like 50 serious books a year. I mean, he's very well read. He's got a sense of history and of philosophy and of politics and of race and of reality. So he has a wisdom in many ways beyond his years. Occasionally you'll listen to him go, okay, the guy's 24. He hasn't had much life experience. But sometimes you also hear a wisdom that is beyond his years.
National Socialists. So you can cling to something dead, or you can try to go beyond it, and that requires seeing things not just in terms of the news cycle or the election cycle of Donald Trump, but you have to see things in terms of decades. That requires some stability, that requires some clear thinking, that requires something other than just emotional reactionism, and that requires like a deeper theory of good and evil. And
stability is the number one word that I want to take from that little excerpt. So if people are stable inside, the opposite of a narcissist who is empty inside and is constantly looking for feedback to tell him who he is, people who are stable inside and who can commit and sustain relationships and deal with tension without acting out. One of the great definitions of maturity is how much tension and stress can you handle before you start acting in either self-destructive or socially destructive ways. So there are some people who can handle great amounts of tension without behaving in socially destructive ways. A lot of people on the alt-right, unfortunately, could not handle tension. Some committed suicide, others committed criminal behavior, other people blew up relationships with family, friends, and work and educational institutions. So how much tension can you handle? How much stress can you handle? And probably the number one thing that enables you to handle stress and tension and conflict and frustration is the quality of your friendships, the quality of your social circle, the quality of your communal bonds.
Wisdom as the discernment of good and evil. So it has to be, again, on the scale of decades, if we're thinking about how do we create a life plan for ourselves that's going to bring us into a better next life, it has to be on the scale of decades. That's not going to be like an alt-right type thing. What is that thing going to be? Well, that's an academic project. Come do that if you're smart. And if you're not smart, then there's a lot of other things you could do socially.
Yeah, some real talk here from this kid. And all successful social movements are elite movements. The reason that we have gay marriage is because the elites got behind it. The reason that we have increasing push for more and more transgender craziness is because the elites got behind it. The reason Barack Obama became president of the United States is the elites got behind this guy and pushed him. So yeah, this guy, Kenneth Brown, big believer in reincarnation. I think complete waste of time, because it doesn't make any difference in how you lead your life. What difference does it make? It doesn't make any discernible difference. So when he starts going off on reincarnation, I just forward through those bits to try to find some good stuff.
To support this kind of a thing. Now, I try to make my videos intellectual to the extent that they're not needlessly intellectual and obfuscating the truth. But I at least want to have a high enough discourse so that I'm attracting people with whom I can interface. I mean, you know, who is good at, what's the kind of personality that's good at reaching middle of the road, average IQ people? It's kind of like, I don't know, a football coach type person, someone who has that Rajasic body.
Right. That's a good point. He is speaking to an elite. So even though his videos don't get many views, the quality of the people who view them is very high. He's pitching himself at upper middle brow. Okay, so highbrow is pretentious, lowbrow is trashy. What you want to be is middle brow, and he's pitching himself upper middle brow. Sometimes I pitch myself upper middle brow, sometimes lower middle brow. I'm kind of like oscillating around that middle brow spectrum.
Type they're like quote unquote natural born leader, charismatic, whatever. They have that sort of type of personality where they.
Vegetable wants to talk about reincarnation, saying you exist when your body dies. Do you cease to exist? I don't believe so, but it doesn't make any difference. Okay, it makes zero difference to how you lead your life. So discussing reincarnation, discussing the next world simply acts as a narcotic, simply as a way to bliss out, drop out from reality. It's the intellectual equivalent of smoking a joint. I have no interest in discussing the next life. I have no interest in discussing reincarnation. I think it's a giant waste of time. It's a narcotic which dulls people and stops them from thinking about reality.
Can tell someone who's just sort of middle of the road, hey, this is what you should do. And then they'll be like, yeah, I don't understand the justification, but the leader said so, so we're just going to follow the leader. I think there's someone, I mean, there's obviously a lot of people who are good at doing that sort of thing, but then there's an academic sort of thing. So I think that...
Like Donald Trump is the great parole whisperer. Like Donald Trump is terrific at speaking to the 95 IQ crowd. And so Roy says, I have no interest in discussing Richard Spencer's private life. Okay, when people say they have no interest in discussing someone's private life, to be logically consistent, what they mean is they have no interest in discussing individuals. They have no interest in people. To lack interest in people is to lack interest in life. It's either a sign of autism or self-deception. I know it's kind of the elite thing to do is to say, oh, I'd rather discuss ideas than people. If you're not interested in people's private life, you're not interested in people. Doesn't mean that you're going to, walk outside their doors and like peek in their windows. Doesn't mean that you're going to behave socially inappropriately. But if you have no interest in Richard Spencer's private life, you have no interest in Richard Spencer, period. If you have no interest in my private life, you have no interest in me. There is an inherent connection between people's private life, their ideas, and their public life. We're all connected. The brain exists inside the body. Okay, the brain is not separate from the body. What's going on in the body affects the brain. What's going on in the brain affects the body. What's going on in the emotions affects the thinking and the brain and the body. What's going on in the body affects the emotions. What's going on in the emotions affects the body. What's going on in someone's private life affects their public life. Who Richard Spencer is as an individual in his private life, even when he's all alone at home masturbating to pornography, that affects other people. Everything we do affects other people. You say, oh, that was a low shot, Luke, but Richard Spencer talked in his podcast on homosexuality, I believe, that he spends more time online watching pornography than would be good for him. So people, particularly guys, like to hold that, oh, what I do in my private life, it doesn't affect anyone else. Well, if you in your private life are sitting at home jacking off to pornography, it does affect other people. It's going to affect the way you relate to others. In all likelihood, it'll be the highlight of your day. So you'll kind of build towards that moment. It will morally, spiritually, psychologically desensitize you. It will reduce your dependence on your spouse or your partner. So everything we do affects other people. If I choose to watch cartoons in my private life, that's going to affect the quality of my show. If instead I spend time in my private life reading the great books, that's going to affect the quality of the show. So who Richard Spencer is as a person, what he does in his private life, what he does when no one else is around, that's going to affect those people who he affects. And he has a devoted following of several thousand people. He is an important figure in the alt-right. And so his private life will have some effect. Doesn't mean that we need to discuss every aspect of it. Doesn't mean we need to discuss it at all. But if we're interested in the alt-right, then you can't logically say I have no interest in Richard Spencer's private life. He's one of the top 5 most important people in the alt-right, and what he does in his private life, what Greg Johnson does, how Jared Taylor conducts himself, Peter Brimlow, Steve Saylor, that affects the wider society, and in particular the people who follow them.
That is more what I'm, that's where my talents lie. That's what I'm sort of best at among my traits. So that's kind of what I'm pushing. It's not to say that someone couldn't start something like, and I think, it should be deeper than, American nationalism, and it should be less needlessly, it shouldn't be called identitarianism. It shouldn't be like, I'm running out of adjectives, but you can't have, it has to be deeper than this, because the whole concept of America is changing.
Yeah, this guy's reaching. He's doing some hard intellectual work, and we get to watch him grow almost in real time. This guy's special.
The debate between, is America going to survive into some kind of like third world Brazil, and we're going to have some kind of third world Brazilian nationalism? Is America going to split up? I personally think it's going the Brazil thing, but at least at this point, people can speculate, right? It hasn't happened yet, so we can speculate. And in this case, to call yourself an American nationalist, I think, is drawing too many conclusions and throwing away too many speculations. You actually have to go deeper than that. Not like we are American nationalists, but actually we are people seeking the truth. We are people seeking goodness.
Yeah, that's some sharp thinking. It's also he discusses things in a way that's socially acceptable. He's not going to get banned off of YouTube. He's not going to have his life ruined for the very high level way that he discusses these questions.
And when we say we're seeking the truth, we mean we are willing to break down sacred cows like the myth of MLK, the myth of Gandhi, the myth of Churchill. We're willing to break down those sacred cows to actually seek what is good and true. We're not going to...
Okay, that's pretty edgy stuff, talking about the myth of Gandhi, the myth of Martin Luther King, the myth of Churchill. So he's definitely dissident right.
To allow the current dogmas and religions to reign over us. We're going to be skeptical about atheism. We're going to be skeptical about materialism. What are the benefits?
So Vegetable says in the chat, I love trying to figure out why we exist. What's the point? What is this place? So in Judaism, you're only allowed to study mysticism, Kabbalah, after you are at least 40 years of age, fully observant of Jewish law, you're married, and you have children. So in other words, Judaism puts a lot of restrictions on the study of these esoteric questions, so much so that essentially, only a tiny number of people are expected to spend any time thinking about these mystical questions. There are also teachings in Judaism that there are a lot of questions you're better off not thinking about. So I used to think that all knowledge was good, and all these types of questions was great. I'm thinking maybe it's better to be passionately involved in life, making more money, developing more relationships, deeper relationships, having a role in your community, doing volunteer work, engaging in intellectual growth that has to do with the real world rather than stuff that makes absolutely no difference to how one leads one's life during an ordinary day.
Benefits of these ideologies, how do they benefit us? People can talk about how they, we went to the moon or we had civilization. Well, okay, let's question the foundations of civilization. Let's question these sacred cows. And you can do it in a way that you can.
So vegetables sums up what I'm saying as don't worry about it, Goy, there is no God, which is a weird reaction when I was talking about what Orthodox Judaism says. Orthodox Judaism introduced God to the world. Okay, the whole concept of God comes from the Jews, that there is one being who created the world, is above nature, who created humanity, who has a relationship with humanity, and who has communicated with humanity through the Torah. That comes from the Jews. Obviously, I'm an Orthodox Jew, and I'm based on God. And stay in your lane may sound like a control system, but get out there and experiment. Don't listen to me. Get out there, drive 70 miles down the freeway, and then just start recklessly changing lanes. And let us know how it works for you. Like when you go to work next, just start giving your opinions on highly controversial issues to your boss, to your coworkers, to your clients, and let us know how it works for you. When you go to the opera, dress like you're going to the beach. Let us know how it works for you. When you don't know anything about something and you're at a social situation where you want the good opinion of people around you, just start opining on stuff that you know nothing about. Now get out of your lane, and then come back here and let us know how it works for you.
Question the sacred cows on the right, you can question the sacred cows on the left. For me, you're left with basic human psychology. And basic human psychology is, in its essence, traditionalist, because our fear of Thanatos drives us toward the maintenance and preservation of our identity, which as a collectivist species is tied to nationalism and in-group.
Okay, so I'm going to wind this up, but this guy's interesting, he's thoughtful, he's funny, he's got a lot of sharp points, he's looking at things in new ways, and Kenneth Brown, a terrific addition to the dissident right. Bye-bye.